Good morning, students. Today our new chapter, that is our environment, is going to start. We will start today our new chapter number 15, and in this chapter we will study the following points. Number 1, like non-biodegradable and biodegradable substances or wastes. Ecosystem, the second important thing is here. The core part of the chapter is the ecosystem and its component parts, that is the abiotic and biotic factor. Both we will discuss in detail, and biotic factors, and the food chain, and thereafter trophic level, food web, ecological pyramids, flow of energy to the different trophic level, how through the food chain the energy will flow. We will also discuss that biological magnification, that means how the different pollutant substances or the toxic substances come into contact with the organism from various resources when we interact with our environment. Effects of our activities on environment, depletion of ozone layer and waste disposal. These are the important points for discussion in this chapter. Now we shall start from the introduction. The environment, the word is very much familiar to us, as because where we are living, that is our environment. Where the other living organisms living, that is their environment. And literally, if we think about the meaning of environment, वातावरण के अगर माने पे हम अगर जाएं, मीनिंग पे जाएं, तो that means surroundings. Whatever may be the things which are present in our surroundings are together constitute the environment. Now, when we are talking about what are in our surroundings, that means we are talking about all the living substances, all the living materials, which in the ecological point of view we may call them the biotic factor, all the living, and all the non-living substances from the ecological study point of view we may call them abiotic substances, abiotic component. Now, since long we are hearing about environment. Somebody our elder, our some experienced person may tell like that present day environment is not so as it was earlier, and there are several environmental issues are the main discussion topics in the different world summit, as well as in our country also there are several discussions about the environment. Why we are talking such things? We are talking such things as because what were the component parts of our environment in the earlier time? What was the expectations from our environment? That is not true in the present days. Why? We may discuss all things here in this chapter. Now, when we are talking that there are several issues of the environment, then at that time it may strike us that there is some interactions, and when there is a mismanagement of this interactions. What is this interaction? The interactions between the different component parts of the environment, whether it is the living part or whether it is the non-living part. When there is any mismanagement between this interaction, if there is any irregularities between this interaction, that means there is a bad impact on the environment, and that will lead a problem to all of us, not only, and it is the main factor responsible for this mismanagement, for this irregularities, is the man, human being. And human and man may think that may I mismanage these things by our own interest, by our own benefit, but it is not give them benefit until a time will come when their dire sequences will be seen. And all these things we will see here when we will discuss these things. The topic has started after a short introduction with the things which are very important, that in everyday life, in our houses, or in our workplaces, or in other places, we are using a lot of articles. Suppose if we are using those articles, after using of the articles, there are so many things are available as a waste materials. What we can do, what we will do with those things? Here is a activity that may you from the waste, kitchen waste, from the other waste like the older clothes, the the papers, the cartoon where the goods are coming in cartoon, and the older footwears, the vegetable leaves, and the other kitchen materials which are maybe wasted. All these things, how we dispose them and how we will categorize them. If we will see about them, then it comes to us that there are two important things. If we will segregate, if we will discriminate all these things, then we will discriminate it into the we will distinguish between these things into two different categories. The first one is the non-biodegradable, the second one is the biodegradable. Biodegradable means, here in your textbook also, and may I also give you a very interesting example to you. You have studied about the life processes. In the life processes, you have seen the process of digestion, that means the nutrition process. In that section, you have learned that in the body of the animal or in the body of the human being, particularly we are talking about the human digestive system, you have seen the complex food materials when ingested by the organism or by the animal or by the man. At that time, that materials broken into the simpler form by the actions of biocatalyst or the enzymes. And we also know from that section and from that system that there are several types of enzyme, and each and every enzyme has their specific functions. That means if we are taking the carbohydrate food materials, specific enzymes for that food materials that will be catalyzed by only that particular type of enzymes which are responsible for catalyzing the carbohydrate. The protein type which catalyze the protein, that cannot catalyze, that cannot break the carbohydrate. Similarly, the type of enzyme which responsible for breaking down of the lipid, that cannot break the carbohydrate, or the proteinaceous type of food particles. In the course of digestion, we will see that protein, fat, carbohydrate will be digested with the help of the specific enzymes. This example is a very good example, and this example has given to compare the nature's activities. Like body, when we ingested food materials, similarly in our environment also we thrown and disposal system for the waste materials. We have to throw the waste materials in our environment. We have a disposal system in our environment. In the body, you have seen the activity of the enzyme. Correct. In the nature also, in our environment also, you will see, if you will distinguish the materials that is categorized under the biodegradable and non-biodegradable, at that time may you think that the substances which are biodegradable broken by the biological processes, and it is not happen in case of the non-biodegradable substances. Similarly, if we will ingest the food materials which are prescribed to us, which usually we eat, and instead of that anything else we may eat, like the coal, that cannot be digested. Similarly, in nature, if we will give something else which cannot be regulated, are decomposed, are to be broken with the help of the biological process, it is very difficult and a concern to us. यहाँ पे ये जो एग्जाम्पल इन डाइजेस्टिव सिस्टम से दिया गया, ये दर्शाने के लिए दिया गया कि देखिए जिस तरह से हमारे बॉडी के अंदर एक सिस्टम के द्वारा, एंजाइम के द्वारा जो है कॉम्प्लेक्स मटेरियल सिंपल फॉर्म में ब्रोकन हो रहा है और उसके बाद जो है वो यूटिलाइज हो रहा है। इस तरह से हमारा नेचर में, हमारा इन्वायरमेंट में, हमारे वातावरण में भी जो सब्सटेंसेस आप फेंके जा रहे हैं, जमा किए जा रहे हैं, तो वो उसका भी एक, क्या उसके लिए कोई आपने अरेंजमेंट किया है या नेचर ने उसके लिए क्या अरेंजमेंट किया? तो नेचर ने जो अरेंजमेंट किया है वो अरेंजमेंट बायोडिग्रेडेबल सब्सटेंसेस के लिए है, न कि नॉन बायोडिग्रेडेबल सब्सटेंसेस के लिए है। नॉन बायोडिग्रेडेबल सब्सटेंसेस के लिए फिर अलग से एक फिज़िकल फोर्स है जिसमें हीट है, प्रेशर है, ये सारी चीज़ें का यूज़ करने के बाद फिर उसको डिस्पोजल किया जाएगा या फिर उसको उसके डिसइंटीग्रेट किया जाएगा, जो कि इन्वायरमेंट के लिए कोई हानिकारक ना हो सके। इन दिस एग्जाम्पल एंड आफ्टर द ऑब्जर्वेशन ऑफ द that activity, with that activity what we have observed, if we will distinguish between the biodegradable and degradable, and again we also may categorize that how many substances, what are the articles which are speedily degraded with the help of the biological system, biological process, and what are the substances which take time. And in this manner we can also see that in like that of the biodegradable, non-biodegradable cannot be biologically processed, and that is why it persists in our environment for a longer period of time, and that is why it is harmful to the environment. It is a concern for all of us. After that we now may enter into our main part of the core part of the chapter, that is the ecosystem. But before that, a concern for us how this environment and why we should need to care our environment, why we are talking about the issues of our environment in today's in our that is a global topic also, and how we will manage, how we will utilize the resources, how that resources are sustained for us not only but for our next generation also. This chapter is already studied by you since a long time, as because it is also subject from classes 6 to 8, that is the environmental education, and in that part you have studied a lot. From that section, what you have learned, what you have studied, just a concise, a summary of all that thing is here in the way of the ecosystem and their component part we will study. But before that, a paragraph will be given to you. May you study and try to understand what is the concerning matter for us regarding our environment. If the environment means surroundings, then now we we look what are the different component parts of our surrounding. The environment includes physical surroundings, in which we will see the contribution of soil, water, air, and all the organisms such as plants, animals, human beings, and also the microorganism like bacteria and fungi in the ecological, from the ecological point of view, we call them, we tell them the decomposers. In the example of digestive system, you have seen that in our system, by the biochemical process or by the actions of the enzymes, the complex materials are the food materials broken into the simpler form. In nature, in environment, that process, the biological process in which there is a breaking down of the biodegradable substances takes place with the help of these organisms, microorganisms like the bacteria and fungi. We will also see their contribution while we will study about the component of the ecosystem. Here just I want to give you a matter of concern. Why the environment? As now you have seen that there are the physical factors and the abiotic factors, all the component parts of our environment, all these things are in our surrounding that constitute our environment. Now, all these constituents of the environment interact with one another. This interaction is known as the ecology. From this paragraph, you will learn many more things. That's why I have written these things for you. All these constituents of the environment interact with one another and maintain a balance between the land, water, air and living organisms. However, अब यहाँ से देखिए जो निगेटिव अप्रोच है हम लोगों का अपने वातावरण के प्रति, अपने नेचर के प्रति यहाँ से स्टार्ट हो रहा कि however over exploitation of nature by man disturbs the delicate ecological balance between living and non-living components of the biosphere. Biosphere is the specific places where the life will exist. This is known as the biosphere, where the life exists. The unfavorable conditions created by man have threatened the survival of not only living organisms but also of man itself. इंसान ये समझ रहा है कि हम अपने अच्छाई के लिए, हम अपने भलाई के लिए, हम अपने लाभ के लिए सब कर रहे हैं, हमें इससे बहुत लाभ होगा अगर इस तरह से हम अपने इकोलॉजिकल और अपने इन्वायरमेंट सिस्टम को डिस्टर्ब करेंगे अपने फ़ायदे के। लेकिन नहीं, उसको उसके कॉन्सिक्वेंसेस नहीं मालूम है कि इसके क्या भयानक उसका नतीजा होगा। ये देखिए यहाँ पर थ्रेटेंड द सर्वाइवल ऑफ नॉट ओनली लिविंग ऑर्गेनिजम्स बट ऑल्सो ऑफ मैन इटसेल्फ। इट इज़ अ मैटर ऑफ ग्रेट कंसर्न दैट आवर रिवर्स आर टर्निंग मस्की, पॉल्यूटेड। हमारे दरियाओं का क्या हाल हो रहा है ना, मछलियाँ किस तरह से तड़प तड़प के मर रही हैं किनारे पे आकर के। फिश आर रॉटिंग ऑन सी शोर्स, किस तरह से पेड़ पौधे बर्बाद हो रहे हैं। ट्रीज़ आर विदरिंग, सिटीज़ आर चॉक्ड। किस तरह से अभी आपने देखा कि लॉकडाउन के इन द पीरियड ऑफ लॉकडाउन वी हैव सीन अ लॉट ऑफ थिंग्स एंड वी विल if we have to compare the present day with the past day, then what we have what is our observation? The main observation is our that free from the pollution. Many things have nature has solved the problem. When there is no vehicle on the road, there is no overcrowded cities and not in the marketplaces there is a crowd, that at that time there is some fresh air, non-pollution we have seen. But just it is not the matter of that 2 days, it is the matter for always what we will face in the past also. Fish are rotting on seashores, trees are withering, cities are choked with foliar and toxic chemical substances are finding their way into our food. This is the biological magnification that we will study in separate point. Biological magnification. In this way we have understand about the environment, and if it is not judiciously utilized by us, then what the problems we will face. You have seen here a simple, very simple example, a common example, and there are so many other aspects also. The bad impact of the environment by the exploitation, over exploitation of nature by man are there other component parts. Now we will come to know about the ecosystem, but before that we have some terminologies, and I want to clarify first of all those terminologies, and thereafter we will come into the main part of the topic. You may see here the terminology. The first one is the ecology. Before when you will know about the ecology, then you will understand in a well manner the ecosystem, as because ecosystem is the unit of ecology. Ecosystem is the unit of ecology. That's why we have to understand about the ecology. The word ecology derived from the Greek oiko. This eco, the Greek of the eco is the oiko. That means the habitation, रहने का स्थान, जहाँ पे लिविंग ऑर्गेनिज्म अपने जिस environment में, in that environment is the habitation. Like the water is the habitation, like for the terrestrial animal, land terrestrial places are the habitation. Similarly, the other habitation, may you classify them according to the different situations. And logos, that is the knowledge. This means knowledge about the habitation. अगर दोनों को मिला दिया जाए तो इसका मतलब होता है knowledge about the habitation. That is the ecology. Now, after knowing this meaning of this, many scientists has put forward many definitions of the ecology, and there are many things established depending upon this fact. Now that is what is the ecology? It is a knowledge about the living organism. Some may tell like that natural history of living beings, and ecology is a community science, but it is not in all these three are true, as because here is not only the knowledge about the living organisms, but the knowledge of the living organisms and the non-living organisms and their interaction is actually the ecology. That is why if we can define in a well manner the ecology, then it is in this way the knowledge about the relation of living organisms, the relation of living organism and the environment in which they live is ecology. That means when we are talking about the relation, it means the interaction, it means the interdependence. Understand? And that is why the ecology means the interaction between the non-living and the living component of the environment is the ecology, the study of ecology. Habitats, the specific natural and chemical conditions in which one or more species or the community of the living organisms may thrive well. Communities as a whole thrive well by interaction is known as habitat. And biosphere, it comprises the places like the land, water, air, etc., where life exists. These are now, after knowing this fact, now come to know about the ecosystem. What I have told you, that ecosystem is the unit of the ecology, and the ecosystem is the unit of the ecology. That's why it has also the functional component and also the structural component. If we will talk about the structural component of the ecosystem, that means we are talking about the components of the ecosystem commonly we call them abiotic and biotic components. That is the structural component of the ecosystem. And while we are talking about the functional component of the ecosystem, then we are talking how the energy captured by the green plants, and that will be now available through the food chain, through the different trophic level from the producers to the consumer in unidirectional manner. That is the functions. That is the functions are the functional unit, are the functional part of the ecosystem. That means, what is the structural part of the ecosystem? The components of the ecosystem, whom we call component of the ecosystem, like the abiotic part or the biotic part. What is the functional part of the ecosystem? The functional part of the ecosystem is the flow of energy from the producer to the consumers in unidirectional way, in a linear sequence. When there is a food chain developed or created, may you see later on when we will discuss about the different component parts. That is the important functional part of the ecosystem. The second important functional part of the ecosystem is the biogeochemical cycle. That means, when the functions of the producer, consumers over, and the decomposers will start their functions, and after the death and decay of the living organisms are the final consumers when decomposed, then in the biological processes by which the decomposers, which are also called the transformers, understand, decomposers is the study point of view, ecological study of point of view. We may call them the producers, consumers, decomposers, but decomposers is also known as the transformers, as because it is responsible for transformation of the materials which are after death and decay were decomposed by the microorganism, once again return back to the nature, and it is reabsorbed by the green plants. In this way, the cycle will be completed. You in the class 9 you have studied about the different biogeochemical cycle. The cycle is also known as the nutrient cycle, or simply you call the cycle, like the nitrogen, like the carbon cycle, like the oxygen cycle, water cycle, etc., etc., etc. In this way, we have now come to know about the definition. Tansley was the first scientist who, after analyzing, after studying these all aspects of the ecology and their functional and their structural unit of the ecosystem, has coined the term ecosystem first time, Tansley in 1935. Tansley in 1935. And what is the definition? May you can define the ecosystem in this way, that the ecosystem may define as the interactions of the abiotic and biotic, are the sum total of the biotic and abiotic and their interaction in such a way that all the component parts independently exist, is known as the ecosystem. May you see the definitions. Look here, the definition, what I have told you, that the sum total of interaction between living biotic and non-living abiotic components capable of independent existence is called ecosystem. Thus, an ecosystem consists of the two components part. Biotic component, it is the structural part of the ecosystem. Biotic components comprising living organism, and the abiotic components comprising physical factors like temperature, rainfall, rainfall, wind, soil and minerals. May you also add the radiant energy, the gases, the organic substances also included under the abiotic factors. Now, if we will study about this factor, about this component part of the ecosystem, then there are all the living organisms like the plants, animals. But from the ecological study point of view, we may differentiate them into the three important categories. First, if we will distinguish them depending upon the mode of nutrition, then we may classify them like the autotrophic, like the heterotrophs. And when from the ecological point of view, when we classify them, then the classification is in this manner, like the producer that can able to photosynthesize, that can able to produce their own food with by the capturing of the solar energy with the help of the inorganic materials from the sources, from the surroundings. And from the mode of nutrition point of view, may you classify them into the heterotrophic and autotrophic. Similarly, after the classification of this producer, the second category in this biotic component is the consumers that can feed on the producers directly or indirectly, like herbivores, carnivores, omnivores. You have already studied each and every these things, and these are the parts of the different trophic level. We will study in the next part of the lesson after this. And the third important part from the ecological point of view is the decomposers that can responsible for by the biological process, by the process of decomposition. They may decompose the dead bodies after the death of the plants and animals, that can be decomposed by the microorganism. Mainly they are categorized they are categorized as the bacteria and fungi. So these are the two important part. And here the abiotic, in this abiotic category we will see, and we may look about the temperature, rainfall, wind, soil and minerals, and also the solar energy, the gases and some other organic substances also included under the abiotic component part. Now after this, it is also essential to know what are the different types of ecosystem. Depending upon the different habitats, the ecosystem mainly classified into the two types. The first one is the aquatic ecosystem and the second one is the terrestrial ecosystem. When we are talking about the aquatic ecosystem, that means we are talking about the two different, further we may classify the aquatic ecosystem into the two different categories. What is that two different category? The first one is the freshwater ecosystem and the second one is the marine ecosystem. That means if we will what I have told, the aquatic ecosystem, and the second one is the terrestrial ecosystem, a land ecosystem. If we further look about the category of the aquatic, then we can categorize it like in this way: freshwater ecosystem, which includes the river, lake, spring ecosystem, river ecosystem, pond ecosystem, understand? And the second one is the marine ecosystem. So here is the, and when it's also categorized like further classified, like when we are talking about the forest ecosystem. Understand? Desert ecosystem, grassland ecosystem, and man-made ecosystem like the crop fields man-made ecosystem like the crop fields, your garden, that is also example of an ecosystem. Here also when you make an aquarium, fish aquarium, that is also the man-made aquatic ecosystem. So these are the some types of the ecosystem. After this we will study about the, as what I have told you, that ecological unit is the ecosystem, and the ecosystem has the functional and structural part. The structural part is the component part which we have seen here, like the abiotic and biotic, and the functional part of the ecosystem is the flow of energy from the producer to the consumers through the different trophic level. We can also study about the what is the trophic level, what is the food chain, what is the energy flow, and many more things about the component in the next part of our class.